Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I have a Mighty review of Occupy Mars. That's right folks, we're going to be doing some Mars shit today. We're going to occupy Mars and mine the place, I guess? Anyway, let me dive on into it here. There's a couple disclaimers before I really dive deep into the review. One is I was given access to a key, so that way I could do a review. That being said, I'm still going to be fair and impartial and honest with you, the viewers. The next thing is, this game is not finished. It is a
beta.
So that has to be said, as well as, yeah, it could definitely use some spit and polish, but I'll get into that in my review. So the context, what I'm getting from the game, understand that right now there is no story in the game that I could find. But from what I can tell, essentially you are here to set up a Mars base and essentially study the planet, survive, and mine the place. Collect minerals, do rock studies, things of that nature, and explore. That's what I can tell, or what I could glean from actually playing through the game that is present. The story mode is not present in the game currently. It's not accessible. So essentially you kind of have like a free roam, if you will, and a tutorial mode available. Now that being said, there is indications that it will be multiplayer co-op enabled, but at the time I don't know if it actually is, because I didn't try to play this online. Now the next thing I think is rather cool is you can actually select a landing site upon spawning. So you can choose where you're going to land, which I would imagine, based on where you land, is going to make things either easier or more difficult, as I said, based on where you land. The options itself is pretty easy to understand. That's one thing I will hold against Conan Exiles, but cannot hold against this game when it came to setting up the initial options on how easy or hard the game will be. It was really easy to understand. A lot of the survival games that has some really advanced options for its survival games, such as Ark and Conan Exiles, the options, there's a lot of options there, and you can change everything in the game. But they're also really complicated at times and doesn't give a good indicator of what is essentially going on. Now, the next thing I thought that was really cool, and I have to give credit for this one, is the landing. It really felt like some SpaceX type shit, or some moon landing type shit. Just the light that came in through the window, the sounds, everything else related to the landing was, to me, spot on without getting too absolutely ridiculous. Of course, there probably could have been more shake. The light that did come in through the window could have probably been almost blinding. But I think that would have ruined the experience of the landing, in my honest opinion. The graphics, for the most part, they're not the best graphics I ever seen, but they're actually pretty good. I like the render distance too. The render distance is actually really awesome. There are some moments where I got on some planes and I could just see forever. The music, for the most part, is fine for the context of the game. Kind of gave me some Firefly flashbacks, to be honest. Just the way certain notes would play and things of that nature kind of reminded me of Firefly. Building really wasn't anything special that I experienced, but it does work. You're not getting anything like Conan Exiles when it comes to building. You're not getting some of the more advanced building that you get in Ark, or the more advanced building that you get in the forest. Now, one thing that is like the forest, though, is the building is more of like a template system. Now, you can still go crazy within the confines of that template, but essentially, if you want to build a ramp, you got one type of ramp to build, and that's it. Same way with airlocks, there's only really one type of airlock to build. Now, there is tubes so you can connect various building pieces together, things of that nature. I didn't really get too deep into that in my playthrough. The day and night cycle, I think, is pretty good. I like how it's warmer during the day and it's cooler at night, and actually the survival elements is nice and well rounded. You have a hunger system, you have hydration, you have health. Of course, you also have to worry about temperature, because you can actually technically freeze to death. You also have to keep eye on your O2 levels. Now, external, that doesn't really matter because external just means you have breathable air. But your suit O2 level is going to be really important because you're probably going to be using your suit O2 level, or at least in my experience from my playthrough, I used a lot more suit O2 level than external. And that's just because I spent more time exploring, working outside where I'm going to need O2. And honestly, I think that was a nice touch to have things such as O2 bottles, have to then refill your slots, your suits O2, things of that nature. Worked out great in my opinion. So nice, well-rounded survival elements that I would have expected from this game. Now, on to the negative stuff. I felt the load times was really long. Now, the one thing I'm going to credit is the initial load times for games for me. I have no idea why, always been this way, but initial load times have always seemed to be a long time, especially when I'm playing like a brand new game. The first time I ever fired up, it seems to take a while to load. However, that being said, even when actually getting in the game and getting things going and things were loading, which essentially was initially landing on the planet, the load time was a little long. Long compared to other survival games, probably debatable because, like Conan Exiles, that can have some quite long load times to it. So, probably really not much longer of a load time than a normal survival game. Sounds could use a bit of work. Some of the sounds just seemed really generic. And honestly, a lot of it sound like something I've heard before in other games. So they could probably use a bit more work in the soundscape if they want to give a bit more of a unique experience when it comes to the sound. That being said, the sound does work for what it is. To me, it's just generic sound. So that's why I feel it could use some work. Now, I don't know why, but my game the whole time was stuck at 30 FPS. I feel this is kind of a negative, especially when I should be able to run this at 60, if not higher. And I had messed with the graphics settings. I went all the way from like the maximum, which is fantastic, all the way down to absolutely bare bones low. And I could not break 30 FPS. And I did have the limiter set for 60. So this is literally the only game I own. I can't play at 60 FPS because it really won't let me. Now, that being said, I had a stable 30 FPS most of the time. There was some moments where the FPS would just drop a little bit. At one point when I was driving around, it actually dropped down as far as 12. Now, one thing I really got to complain about, and this is actually kind of what killed the game for me, is the world feels empty. There is caves, there is outpost, but it felt absolutely empty. I didn't find any survivors. I didn't find any notes. When I did find abandoned outposts, they definitely looked abandoned, but I didn't see signs of struggle or a fight or nothing. I found nothing in any caves. Literally, the world was absolutely empty outside of my stuff, my assets, and the outpost. And honestly, it was generally overall boring. I also seen that online there's quite a decent list of bugs. I wouldn't say extremely long list of bugs, but just be aware that there is bugs to this game, but it is also a beta that can be forgiven. Final thing that really kind of pulled me out of the experience of this game, and understand I might be mistaken about this, but shouldn't Mars be more red? I'm just saying it was like a lot of tans and a sand, like, sand type colors and brown, but there was no red to be seen. And I thought the whole idea of Mars is it had a really high oxide iron content in the soil, which gave it its red color. You would see that even if you're on the surface. I'm just saying. And that's only going by photographs I've seen from different lunar rover explorations of Mars. Now, understand, I could be mistaken. I'm not an expert in Mars. Maybe the area I landed in was an area that the iron content in the soil is not as high, but it just seemed like a lot of sand colored soil to be Mars. Anyway, folks, now here's a couple things. The game is set for release in Q1 2023. That's going by the Steam page. I have no idea when the developers plan on actually releasing this. I don't see anything on their Discord on if they have an exact idea of when they're going to release this. The next thing is I don't see a price tag for this game anywhere. So what can I say? I can't really say if it's worth it or not because I don't see a price tag. To be honest, in my opinion, in my experience, and what I played, I can't recommend this game. It's boring. There's many other survival games that does survival stuff better. If you want a more lax survival game but high action, you can check out Ark. You can check out Conan Exiles. If you want a more hardcore, realistic survival game, you can go check out The Forest, as well as Sons of the Forest is soon coming, which looks like it's going to blow The Forest and everything else that's ever been done in the realm of survival games out of the water. I don't think this game is totally worthless, though. I see some possible potential here. I do see the potential, but it needs more work. It definitely needs a bit more fleshed out. And honestly, for me to say it's worth it or not is going to be based on the price tag and really what you're after in a survival game. Me, I need a little bit of action to attract my attention, to keep me occupied. And essentially, this game, out of the few hours that I played, kept me occupied for about 10 minutes because essentially there was the initial building process. That was interesting. And then I found an abandoned outpost, which spiked my interest again. And that was the end of my interest. I played for several hours and basically I was amused with the game for 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. So it's right now, it's to me, it's just really boring. That being said, I don't see anything egregiously disgusting with the game either. As I said, I see potential. Anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up my review of Occupy Mars at that. Anyway, folks, hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in and have yourself a wonderful day.